does the strength come from? Where does the strength originate in pines? Fundamental concept. Dictates everything that we do. Where does the strength originate in pines?
Growing back.
What's that?
Growing back.
Roots. Roots. How do we know this? What makes me say strength originates in the roots? How do we know? Grows up, okay. Well, if we look at a juniper, where does the strength originate in a juniper?
Foliage.
Foliage. Foliage. What tells us these things? How do we know this? How do you derive this information from a tree? You've got to learn to think bonsai, right? What tells you this? What's that? Growth pattern. What's that?
Stabilize themselves so that
Okay. We take a pine, we reduce the foliage significantly. What happens? What's that? It dies?
Backbuds.
Backbuds. It backbuds. We take a juniper, we reduce the foliage significantly. What happens? It dies. Okay? So if you take a pine produces particularly black pine, red pine. One flush of growth, we cut it all off, decandle it in the summer, and what does it do? Pushes a second flush of growth. Okay? If the strength originates in the foliage, there's no possible way, if we cut off all of its new growth, that it's going to regenerate. Okay? We do the same thing with the juniper. We cut off 50% of juniper foliage, 60, 70% of juniper foliage. It starts to steady decline downhill, right? Okay? So pine strength comes from the roots. We know that because if we remove a significant amount of foliage, it responds with more foliage, right? Okay, so we have to use that to our advantage. If the strength originates in the roots, how do we direct that strength? What allocates how much strength goes everywhere in the tree? What directs the strength? Okay, the roots are just pushing all of this energy, resources, moisture up into the tree. What's that? Pruning? Pruning? Okay. But what in the tree is telling the tree where to put all that energy? Branching?
You're saying yesterday about the oxen, about the strongest buds wants to go to the strongest
okay.
buds. So
we're just saying, what's saying I need moisture, I need nutrition?
foliage.
Foliage. Needle mass dictates strength allocation, okay? So if we apply this, these are two fundamental concepts of pines. You should never ever forget this, okay? These apply to every single pine you'll ever touch. So if we know that needle mass dictates where this tree is going to put all the resources that the roots that are providing the strength for the tree are providing, technically if we have an even distribution of foliage across every single branch on the tree, is every branch getting the same amount of moisture and nutrition? Theoretically. Yes, yes, it's true, it's real, this is very real, okay? If there are 10 needles on every single bud, every bud gets the same amount of moisture to keep those 10 needles turgid, photosynthesizing, functioning, and growing, okay? So when we start talking about pines, we start talking about distribution of strength, we're talking about evening out the needle mass that occurs over the entire tree. Fundamental concept, strength comes from the roots, needle mass allocates where that strength goes. We good? Okay. So, do we all have Japanese black and red pine, or Japanese black pine, or Japanese red pine? We work with those, we have those, we fool with those, we've had negative success with those, right? Failures, some success, mixed results.
Not easy in our climate.
Not easy in your climate, right? So let's talk about how we make that really easy. So we're going to start off with black and red pine, and then we're going to move to the native pines, okay? Alright, so these are 2 flush per year pines, which means right? They will produce 2 flushes of mature growth in 1 year. Okay? Now there are some North American pines that will do the same thing with scattered results. There are probably some European pines on the right year. If you looked at them right and you treated them just right, they might do the same thing, but you cannot depend on it, correct? So the Scots pine You can prune long candles, they may get a second flush of candles, but you couldn't do it over the entire tree and depend on that as being a result. Is that true?
Yeah.
Yeah, Mugo pine definitely not. Genetically, they're not engineered for that. Where does the Japanese black pine come from? Where does it come from? Where do they grow natively?
Coast.
Mountains, coast, coast, right on the ocean, okay? They grow right on the ocean in the southern part of Japan, right? So when we talk about the major operation involved with Japanese black pines, what do we do in the middle of the summer? Decandle, right? We decandle. Well, it just so happens that's the same time of year, right? Same time of year as typhoon season. So all of a sudden these black pines have put out all this new growth. You get 120-mile-an-hour winds on the coast. All of the new needles are stripped off, all of the new growth is stripped off, and they have to regenerate themselves, right? That's a natural adaptation to the conditions that they grow in. And they've got the growing season to produce a second flush that matures in the same year. Make sense? Mm-hmm. Okay? So Japanese red pine, where do they come from?
In the middle.
In the middle, coast up to the foothills, right? So what happens from the foothills up into the high elevation?
White.
White pine, white pine. And white pine we know can't produce a second flush of growth that matures in the same season, similar to our European pines, similar to our North American pines, right? Where they occur dictates how they behave, right? 2 flushes of growth per year that mature, fully mature. All right, so let's start the cycle of training in the spring or at the time of spring or new acquisition, okay? You just bought a Japanese black pine, what do you do? Assuming it's healthy. Assuming it's healthy, you just bought a Japanese black pine, what do you do? Or if you're starting this cycle in the spring, what do you do? Where do you start? What's our first move? I'm more awake than you guys are. Come on now. What's that? Okay. We started off with 2 fundamental concepts. What do we have to do? Start the training cycle of a pine. Balance energy. How do we do that?
Needles.
What's that?
Needle removal.
Needle removal. Needle pluck. What's our reference? How do we know how many needles to pluck?
More at the top, less at the bottom.
More at the top, less at the bottom. What did we say our fundamental concept said? If we have the same distribution of needles across the entire tree, what's that? All the same. So then how do we know where that threshold exists?
Observation.
Needle pluck 2. Weakest significant branch. Significant. Okay, so you're going to have a few small, weak, wimpy buds at the bottom of the tree that are not significant, that have 2 or 3 needle clusters on them, and you're saying, do I remove the entire tree down to that little, that sparse of foliage? No, you don't. But that bottom branch that forms the main branch on your tree, or the interior that's dying back, we're saying that's significant. That helps establish this tree or give it a good design. We're going to take the entire tree down to that area to close the gap between the strong at the top and the middle down to that weakest section. So now we have the tree saying all of these portions of the tree have the same amount of significance to me, right? We're telling the tree this branch is significant, okay? Our threshold, 10 to 12 pairs, right? So we may have a weak significant branch that has, say, 6 pairs of needles on average across the entire branch. We're not going to take the whole tree down to that because we still have to have a tree that functions, right? Needles are solar panels. Solar panels photosynthesize. Photosynthesis generates food. That's what feeds the roots, feeds the development of the tree. We're all good there? Okay. 10 to 12 pairs is our threshold. We won't go past that. But if we have 20 or 30 pairs of needles per bud on the top of the tree, and we've got 6 on the bottom, and we take the top down to 10 to 12 pairs, we've closed the gap, right? We've told the tree this bottom branch has significance to us. First step, even out the energy, even out the strength. Okay, assuming this tree is healthy, as long as this tree is healthy, start to bring balance to the pine. Got it? So that's in the spring if we're starting this cycle, or when we have a new acquisition, when you get a new pine. You can do this at any time of the year. Any time of the year. It doesn't matter. All right? Okay. What's the most important thing we can do for pines that have 2 flushes of growth per year if we are going to candle them in the summer? What's the most important thing we have to do? Fertilize. Fertilize. Okay, we've got to get them ready for this operation, right? We can't just have this tree that kind of sputters along, limps along, and then we just whack off all of its new growth. We've got to build it up so that it has the strength to endure that operation. That's serious, right? It pushes out all of its energy to generate this first flush of new growth. We come in and we say, yeah, no. We take all that off. And that tree's sitting there saying, wait, I wanted that, right? I wanted that. We took it all off. We said, we don't want that, right? And so now it's saying, I'm kind of tired. I'd rather go to bed right now, but all right, I'll push another flush of growth. That's how we get smaller growth. What's the goal of decandling in the summer? Why are we doing it? Why do we do this?
Second flush.
Second flush. Why do we want a second flush?
More branching.
More branching, more buds, ramification. What'd you say?
Smaller candle.
Smaller. Smaller needles. Smaller internodes. Okay? Don't forget this. So when people say we decandle to get back budding, that's wrong. It's totally wrong. Misconception. If you want back budding on a pine, don't decandle it. Right? A pine that has energy moving through a very strong tip. This tip has a ton of needles. Those needles are photosynthesizing. They're generating food. That food is feeding the roots. The roots are saying, I like that. Thank you. I'm going to help you keep growing. They give that needle tip or that branch tip energy. That branch tip continues to accumulate food. Food to the roots. Roots, energy. Food, energy, food, energy. Back budding, back budding, back budding. Okay? You cut that off, that stops. That stops. Alright? Now there's other things that it does do, and we'll talk about that. Okay? But don't make that misunderstanding. We're doing this to get smaller needles, smaller internodes, because we're trying to make a bonsai that's small. Right? That first flush of growth is a long flush of growth. Even if we have a very evenly balanced tree, that first flush is going to be strong and long. Okay? Let's go back to this concept of fertilizing. We're fertilizing to prepare the tree for this operation in summer, correct? We're all there? We're all together? Yeah? All right. How do we know when to fertilize? How do we know what our objective is? How do we decide all of these things? When do we fertilize? Why? How many times? What are we doing? Haphazard application?
Depends what stage the tree's at and what growth you're looking at.
Okay.
For the raw material to kind of push on, or some kind of refine.
Okay.
The balance you're feeding.
So let's assume if we're here, we have a tree that has somewhat of a defined shape, or it's past its first styling and we're starting the building process as a bonsai, all right? Developing ramifications, starting to get shape, all right? Let's assume we're there. Because otherwise, this whole conversation, it's different, right? It's different. All right? How do we decide how we fertilize? This is important, right? This is important. Fertilizing isn't just something that we do haphazardly. Fertilizing has a strategy behind it.
Before it starts moving.
Before it starts moving. Okay, so fertilize before it starts moving, right? So this is what I want to drive home with you guys today. When you guys pursue bonsai, there is a method behind the madness of everything that you do, right? It just depends on how much you want to think about it and how much time you want to put into it, okay? When would you decandle a black pine in this area? Early June. Early June? Late May, early June? What about in Ireland? Same time, all right? So let's say June 1st, just for the sake of speaking now. When we decandle, the timing of decandling depends on the size of the tree, what we're trying to accomplish in training, all of these other things, okay? There are different times that we can sway this date to get different impacts, right? Shohin's going to be a little bit later. Larger might be a little bit earlier. Medium might be right here, okay? Where I'm at, we've got to decandle larger trees the 3rd week of May because our growing season is very short. We have a lot of rain, just like you guys do here, okay? So let's say June 1st. When we're fertilizing, we need 2 to 3 applications. 2 to 3 applications, 4 to 6 week intervals. Okay, 4 to 6 week intervals. How did I even come up with that? 4 to 6 week intervals. What does that mean? Let's assume we're using organic fertilizer, which you all should be using. Okay.
It's best, come 6 weeks. The best to the fertilizer at that stage.
Okay.
You have to replace it then.
Okay, so you get the maximum amount of input in the fertilizer, now 4 to 6 weeks. Okay. What aspect of fertilizer contributes to foliage development and growth? What element in fertilizer?
Nitrogen.
Nitrogen. Nitrogen. Okay? Nitrogen. What element is most easily decomposed and most water soluble?
Nitrogen.
Nitrogen. That's right, nitrogen. So if we're using organic fertilizer and we're saying, okay, nitrogen is what's going to contribute to foliage growth and foliage development. And nitrogen is also the element that's most easily decomposed and water soluble. Water soluble meaning it washes out of the soil the easiest, okay? It's bound with the weakest connection to the soil, right? We can safely say in 4 weeks all of the nitrogen is washed out of our soil from a fertilizer application, okay? 4 weeks nitrogen lasts. We're saying we want smaller needles, smaller internodes. If we cut candles on June 1st, do we want there to be a significant amount of nitrogen in the soil when we cut the candles? No, no, because all of a sudden we're going to get long needles and long internodes, and we're asking for short needles, short internodes. Okay? So if that's the case, June 1st,
Work your way back then.
that's right, work your way back. June 1st is the day that we cut the candles. If we're saying June 1st and we're on a 4-week cycle, we're going to come back to May 1st as the last application of fertilizer. Okay? And if we go 4 weeks prior to that, we're going to be at April. And if we go 4 weeks prior to that, we're going to be at March. Fertilize before the roots start moving, before you start seeing growth, that's going to be in March, right? Black pines have strong roots. You can start fertilizing them earlier to start building up this resource for this operation, and they will love it. They will love it. Other trees can't handle that. Black pines, red pines, they can. Okay? So this is on the 3 application cycle. If we have a tree we're really trying to pump up to get a very good response from this candle pruning operation, we will apply 3 applications at 4 weeks. Okay? If we say we've got a very well balanced pine, it's very mature, we're not trying to get this massive flush of backbite, we don't need that, we don't need this massive flush of 6 candles per thing, we need maybe 3 to 4 and we'll be good. Just some options, and we're going to go up to 6 weeks. So if we're at June 1st, we're going to go mid-April. Or we're going to go whatever that would be. It's the last day, right? Okay? 2 applications. Boom, boom. 6 weeks before we get to June 1st, cut the candles and we still have the same impact, just a little bit less vigor in that. Okay? Alright? Does that make sense? Do we understand this? Back into what you're doing. Always. Okay? Now if we're talking about junipers or we're talking about single growth species of pines, we're going to talk about this. Sylvestris, the mugos, all of that stuff. This is just for pines that will produce 2 mature flushes. Okay? Alright, let's go here. So we're saying we're going to candle prune, right? What does that mean, candle prune? What does that mean? What do we do? What do we do? Do we remove just the bud? Do we remove half of it? 3/4 of it? Do we cut the weak at one time, the medium at another, the strong at another? What are we doing? What is candle pruning? Tell me.
Balancing the energy.
Okay, you're balancing the energy. Stopping the shoot from elongating, but what am I physically doing? What is the schedule? What are we thinking? What are we doing? What do you do? What do we do? Stop the candle.
Snap it.
Snap it. Okay, snap it. Break it.
Stop the extension growth.
Stop the extension.
The shape.
Okay. So if you read about Japanese black pine, right, you can find 5 million articles about candle pruning. Literally, it's a limitless library of do this, do that, right? And every one of them is different. So the most recent thing I read was if you cut the strongest candles towards the top, okay, just cut off the top third, and then you cut the medium candles in half, and then you cut the weaker candles down by 1/3, the time it takes that candle to die back is what allows you to balance the energy, okay? You're saying, whoa, right? How could you ever even, how could you ever even do that, right? It's impossible, okay? And then there are some that say, okay, cut the weakest ones first, and then 7 to 10 days later cut the medium, and then 7 to 10 days later cut the strong, right? And that way the weakest ones got cut first, they've got time to catch up, or something like that, right? Can any of us actually do that? No, right? So here, let's simplify. Let's simplify. Cut everything at same time. Cut it all, okay? That means cut the strong, it means cut the medium, it means cut the weak, and it means cut the candles that haven't even emerged, okay? So we're gonna have these strong candles that look like this. And we're gonna have these medium candles that look like this. And we're gonna have these weak candles that look like that. And then we're gonna have these candles that have this bud here that haven't even emerged, okay? We're gonna cut every single one of these. We're gonna cut this so we leave just a small amount, 5 millimeters at the base. Okay, and for this one, we're gonna put our scissors in here and just snip the tip of that, okay? So this didn't even grow in the spring. It didn't even emerge. If we take our scissors in there and we damage that bud, this will produce a second flush of candles, of full-grown, mature candles, okay? Very fundamental thing about Japanese black pine. If you let this sit, this bud will sit viable for 3 to 5 years, okay? Uncut, and it won't move. If you cut it, it will produce a second flush of fully mature growth. Amazing, yeah? Okay, so we cut these off completely, okay? So we don't want to break them, we don't want to cut them in half, we don't want to just remove this bud here. Cut the candle off. Cut it off, okay? Cut the candle off. So at the same time we've done candle pruning, what else do we need to do? Needle pluck. Needle pluck. Okay? So we're saying we drew a threshold of 10 to 12 pairs of needles. Yeah? Now we're going to needle pluck again. What are you talking about? Why would we do that? Because now we've gotten a balance of energy, right? Based on the fact that we closed the gap between the strong and the weak. We're cutting off all the candles. We've got to further expand on the severity of this operation to get the tree to respond exactly how we want it to. We built up its strength with fertilizer. We've removed its strength by cutting off the candles. We're going to further decrease its strength and further close this gap between the weakest significant branch and the stronger areas. Needle pluck. 6 to 8 pairs. Okay? Just a minor adjustment. Minor adjustment. 6 to 8 pairs. What's going to happen? What do we do now?
Start feeding again?
Start feeding again? What did you say?
Stop.
It'll start back way. What's going to happen at this cut site?
New buds.
New buds, new buds. And not just one, right? We'll get 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, depending on how vigorous our tree is, a plethora of buds. So we're saying we're going to have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 buds that are coming from this location. We left this small little section of needle because we know those buds exist right at the base here. So if we cut this too tight, we're going to cut off the new buds that are going to come from that cut. Got more paper? So, back to summer. We're good there. Now we're here. And we're here to fall. Okay? So we're saying we're going to get multiple buds coming out of these cut sites. Okay? We said we start feeding again. Start feeding. When do we start feeding? And why? And how do we know?
When the buds have set,
When the buds have set. What does that mean?
when they're there, you feed in the fall, in the autumn.
In the autumn, in the fall. Okay? Talk to me about this. Okay, so we've got these new buds that are emerging, and the goal of this whole operation was what? Smaller needles, smaller internodes. If we start fertilizing after we cut, if we start fertilizing right when we see these buds, what's going to happen? They're going to elongate. Okay. But we also see that we've got 4, 5, 6 shoots coming out of one cut site. Do we do anything with those? Select the buds? Okay, but what's our goal? Smaller needles, smaller internodes. So if we take 5 or 6 buds and we break that down to 2, the amount of energy, because the strength is coming from the roots, is going to go into 2 as opposed to 5 because it's longer needles, longer internodes, right? Oof, oof. Okay, all right, now we're thinking. Now we got it, okay? So if we fertilize at this point, we're defeating the purpose. If we select buds, we're defeating the purpose. What do we do right now? Don't touch. Don't touch your tree. No matter how much you want to handle this tree, no matter how badly you desire to select buds, no matter how bad it feels to not fertilize this thing, don't touch it, don't touch it, don't touch it. Don't touch your tree right now. Don't touch your tree right now, okay? Don't touch, okay? But we're gonna get to a point where we have to touch it. We're gonna get to a point where it needs fertilizer. Fall fertilization, most important fertilizer application of any application across the year, okay? At least 2 applications of fertilizer. In this section, before we get to the final fall work on our pines, why did I leave this here? What does that mean? How do we know that it's time to fertilize? How do we know we can fertilize without being a detriment to this goal and objective that we had in mind? How do we know? What are the signs? There's 3 of them. 3 things that tell us that the new candles have grown, elongated, and hardened off and will not be impacted by fertilizer. What are they? Needles hardened up. What tells us that? They're sharp. Very good. What else? Color. What's the color become? Dark. One more. This is a little bit more vague.
The sheath coming out the bottom, is it? On the needle?
Okay. So it has to do with that joint, right? When we work on a pine that has very soft needles, what happens? We start to wire it and the needles start falling off, right? So we know that the needles have hardened off when we run our hand through the tree, and those needles we have to actively work to pluck them off, okay? So we have stabilization. At origin. At the origin of the needle, okay? Now it's a solid needle, it's dark green, it's sharp, it's hard, no more elongation. We fertilize, okay? Fertilize. So we still have 5, 6 buds on each cut site at this point in time, right? We've got big, long, strong ones. We've got small ones. You guys are saying, Ryan told us to do this, now my tree looks like crap. I can't hardly stand this. I don't know what this guy was talking about. I definitely question how much knowledge he actually has. Mr. Kimura probably didn't teach him very well, right? When we get to the fall, this is when we see the fruit of all of our labor, right? Fall. That's why all of the shows in Japan are in the fall. Pines look the best. Junipers look the best. Deciduous trees are turning colors or without their leaves. This is when we get to really enjoy what we've done all year long, this arduous process to get to now, right? What do we do in the fall? Think about what we have in our tree. What do we do with that now? Balance? Balance, very good. Okay, balance. Balance through bud selection. Okay. We'll say shoot selection. The shoot selection is not haphazard, right? As much as we would like to believe shoot selection is something that we can say, okay, we shoot select and we move on. It doesn't work like that in Ryan's world, okay? What is shoot selection? What dictates our shoot selection? What are we selecting? What's that? Direction. Direction into what do we want? Direction. Lateral. Okay. Laterally emerging. Okay, so notice that's number 3. Right? So we can have a vertical and a bottom growing shoot, and we can wire them like this and have laterals. So that's a very liquid concept. If we have a tree that has, say, 400 shoots on it, you don't want to go through and each one have to wire all of those shoots to develop laterally emerging buds, right? So if you're smart, you're naturally going to be pruning to get those laterally emerging buds, assuming we've got these other 2 things in place. What are they?
Strength.
What's that?
Strength.
Strength. So we want, what do we want in strength?
Strongest.
Okay, the strongest. What if we're at the top of the tree and we've got these big, long, strong guys?
Bundles.
What's that?
Bundles and needles.
Bundles?
Bundles and needles.
Candles and needles? Okay? So we want equal strength. Equal strength. So when we say shoot selection, how many shoots are we leaving at each cut site?
2.
2. Why 2? Why 2?
Ramification.
Ramification. Okay? This is fun. Cut. Cut. years. 4 years and you have a mature branch. Now, if we were really good, we could do this, okay? If we're really good, we could do this, but it doesn't work out that well, right? We know there's deviations in the plan, okay? 4 years, 1, 2, 3, 4, complete branch. That's development, right? Perfection in bonsai, okay? 2, always 2. If we have 3, what happens? 3 buds at any one location, what happens? Swelling. We ruin the structure, okay? 2 allows us to develop ramification without impacting the structure, okay? It's the best we can do. All right, so we're taking it down to 2, laterally emerging, boom, equivalent strength. 2 buds of equivalent strength. We want those to be synonymous, okay? What's this one? This one is very important. It's something that you guys have never heard before, I guarantee it. But I want you to think, what are we thinking about? You've got all of these shoots. We're taking it down to 2, hopefully laterally emerging. What else is there to consider structurally? Okay. Okay, direction. All right. So what are you saying about the direction? Opposite. Anybody care to venture a guess? Nowhere on this chart did you see this look like this. Right? The shape of the crotch between those 2 buds is as significant as any other aspect of this operation. Okay? So we always hear, you've got all of these buds, right? Well, we'll eliminate these strongest guys and we'll leave these 2, same strength, right? But then we've got this horrifically ugly crotch here, and the best we can do is wire these 2 guys forward. And now we have this shape in our branch, right? And we see that time and time again in our pines, where you've got this big, strong branch, and somebody said you remove that middle one, so now you've got these 2 lateral ones, and to form that branch, now you have to wire those forward. So we get this, and we had this, and we cut that guy out, and now we've got this, and now we've got that. Is that ever going to be a beautiful branch? No way. Never. Never in a million years. Now that's not to say you don't ever do this, right? Because maybe this middle one is just so long and strong we can't use it. But in the future, you're probably going to be cutting it back to a secondary bud, or cutting off 2 of those things and just using this one as the tip of that branch, okay? But if we can stop that, we're looking for acute angles between those shoots, okay? We will try for that. We will strive for that. First is equivalent strength. We will sacrifice this for this, okay? But if we can get equivalent strength and acute angles, we will sacrifice laterally emerging for these 2. These are our priorities, all right? Make sense? Good to go? Okay, so shoot selection now. At the top of the tree, chances are we're looking for the smaller shoots, right? Because we've already got a significant needle mass, and we know that we're trying to maintain the silhouette of this tree. We're looking for shorter needles, shorter internodes, because we don't want it to get bigger. We want to keep it small, okay? At the bottom of the tree, we have these weaker areas that we're saying we're trying to close the gap of needle density. Tons of needles at the top, fewer needles at the bottom. What if we get a shoot down here that has so we had a shoot that was kind of sparse, but because we've closed the gap through needle plucking, right? Needle plucking in the spring, and again, closing the gap in terms of distribution there in the summer, all of a sudden we get a weak shoot that maybe has one really strong shoot, and then one really weak shoot, and then one shoot that doesn't really show us any signs of strength, but still we've got 3. We're making a selection. We look at this and we say equivalent strength, right? But we're trying to get needle density in that weakest area. So if we get this strong shoot, even if it doesn't fit within the shape of our tree, we're going to keep this, okay? Get rid of that weakest one in the weakest areas. That's how we close the gap in strength. That's how we close the gap in strength. Now we've got needle mass in that weaker area. Now we've started to really make some progress. Make sense? Okay. Shoot select. And again, what do we need to do in the fall? And again. Needle pluck. Needle pluck. Okay. What needles are we removing? We're now realizing how beautiful our tree has become over the past year, right? Maybe we're getting it ready for a show. Maybe it's going to the no-landers in January. What needles are we removing?
Long one.
Okay, remove the long ones. What about the old ones? Do we remove all the old needles? No. Why not? Okay, so we've got new needles and we've got old needles. We're saying we don't remove all of the old needles. Is that what I'm hearing? What do you guys think? Do or don't? Don't remove all the old needles. What do you think?
You hear so many different ways of doing this. I've heard before, yes, remove old needles, but not necessarily with black pine. I don't have enough knowledge about black.
Never remove all the old needles. Ever. Never remove all the old needles. Never remove all the old needles. Never remove all the old needles. Okay? Here's what will happen. You'll remove all the old needles and you'll feel good. Because now you got all these new needles and they're very beautiful. Right? And the next year, that tree goes through this cycle. You cut the candles, you do all the stuff that you have to do. And you'll notice that the candles are a little shorter, a little smaller, and you're thinking, good, this is all working. Move all those old needles and we feel good. We'll go around to the third year, and we'll notice that the candles are a little shorter, a little smaller, tree's a little less vigorous. We'll think, okay, this is working, we're getting this tree down and smaller and smaller and smaller, okay? And then all of a sudden we forget to water one weekend when we're away, or we get a hot spell, or we get a cold spell, and we lose several branches or our tree dies, okay? You can attribute lack of success in a black pine to simply having removed all the old needles. So removing all the old needles didn't kill the tree, but it did weaken the tree to the point where an adverse condition was the end of our tree. Okay? And that's pretty much what happens to black pines. Right? It's very difficult to kill a black pine outside of doing something that decreases its energy to the point where it can't subsist in a really adverse condition. Okay? So old needles are important. What do? New needles photosynthesize. Clean photosynthetic surface area, no dust, no debris, hasn't been jaded by all of the weather conditions that cause scarred surface area. Right? What do old needles do?
Stored energy or?
Stored energy, hormones. Hormones. Allocation of hormones, okay? So we've got the bud at the tip of the branch, but we've got these older needles that are now dealing with hormonal allocation through each individual bud. We remove that, yes, we have photosynthesis, but we're missing a very major aspect of how trees grow, and that's hormonal allocation, okay? So the old needles deal with hormones, new needles deal with photosynthesis. When we're plucking needles, we're going to remove some old, okay? We're going to remove some new. We're going to keep primarily new, but we are going to keep some old. They are considerations for needle plucking. Immediately. Where's the only place on a tree we can create a clean line? The bottom of the branch. Bottom growing needles are the first needle to go. Okay, so we're talking about needle distribution. Okay, we're going to needle pluck. 10 to 12 is the threshold again, just like it was in the spring. Okay, bottom growing needles come off first. Before we even start considering anything else, those come off because we know that's how we get a clean line in our tree. Boom, we just increased the aesthetic quality of our composition. What's next? With pines, what's next? Okay, we get these big tufts. We've got a bunch of buds in one area. It looks like kind of like an afro, right? We want to delineate these as two different buds. We're going to remove needles from in between buds to delineate buds. Okay? Number 3, if we still haven't plucked below that threshold, okay? This is a fundamental aspect of showing trees. You have pines that have needles that look like this and pines that have needles that look like this. Which one's more beautiful? Okay? So we're going to go through and we're going to take off needles that are immediately crossing and detracting from the aesthetic quality of our tree. If we can have a pine that looks like this, that's a beautiful pine. This is not so beautiful. If we don't have the needle mass, we'll deal with this. But if we can, we want this. Okay? Crossing needles. Alright? So, now we're back to 10 to 12 pairs of needles. Let's push us right back to here. But we're in the fall. So from the fall through the spring of the second season, we have nothing to do. In fact, we have nothing to do except fertilize on our plant schedule until we get to summer. In the summer, we decandle and needle pluck. Get to this point where they harden off, we fertilize. Get to this point, we shoot, select, and needle pluck. Get to here, we fertilize. So really, when you get into this cycle, once you get past this first major operation in the spring, you candle prune, you shoot select. Candle prune, shoot select. Candle prune, shoot select. And black pines become very, very easy. Very, very easy, okay? So everything that I just explained sounds like a whole lot. Once you start doing it, candle prune and needle pluck, shoot, select, and needle pluck. Candle prune and needle pluck, shoot, select, and needle pluck. That's twice a year. And then conscious application of fertilizer. That's it. So all of those articles that you've read that were so confusing and goodness gracious, how do I do that? And this calendar and the schedule. No, just get rid of it, right? Very, very easy. We had to do 500 of these a year, right? 500 of these a year. If you consider 6 apprentices doing 500 of these a year, this occurs in a 1-month period, right? Each apprentice had to do 4 to 5 trees a day. Some of these trees are this large, 4 to 5. Candle prune, needle pluck, get it out the door. Candle prune, needle pluck, get it out the door, right? By the end of the day, needles were literally knee-deep in the workshop. It was horrible, horrible. There was pine needles everywhere. And if you're the youngest apprentice, it was the most challenging cleaning period of your life. It was horrible. Are we all clear? Do we have any questions? We good to go? Everybody is an expert on black pines now? Fantastic.